Hey everyone, it's Junaid here, and in this video I want to talk about how to deal with toxic people. So the reason that you're most likely watching this video is because you're currently dealing with someone that's quite toxic. Whether they're emotionally toxic, they're simply wasting your time, or any other sort of reason. At the moment you're fed up with this and now you want to see some change because you're done and finished when it comes to this toxic behavior. And if all of this sounds quite familiar and you can relate to this, in that instance, this is the video for you. So with that said, let's jump into it. Alright, number one, get rid of them. So if you're someone that's currently dealing with a toxic person, the best thing you can most likely do is to get rid of them. And yes, I know it's such a basic answer, but the truth is that in most instances, this is the best solution. But at the same time, I also realized that most likely the reason that you're watching this video is because it doesn't feel that easy to get rid of this particular person. It may be one of your family members, one of your co-workers, one of your teachers, and thus if that's the scenario, it can be quite complicated. So in the instance that it actually is difficult to get someone out of your life, you need to try to reduce the time you spend with that individual. And also acknowledge that sometimes it is hard to reduce that time that you spend with someone. Say for example it's one of your teachers. Obviously I'm not gonna recommend you to not go to that class, but rather if you go to that class, try to block out the things that you don't like about the teacher and try to focus on the task. By getting rid of that individual or simply spending less time with them, you can also decide to put less time into them emotionally, so you can still be present there, but instead of putting a lot of effort and emotion when it comes to the conversation or whatever kind of relationship you've got with that individual, try to minimize that so you're still present with them in that particular moment. But now, since you understand that they can be quite toxic, you reduce the emotional baggage that you carry into the conversation, and this way it will feel like that the person is less toxic, and this way you can deal with their toxic levels. Moving on to number two is to understand the toxic person. So when it comes to us as humans, sometimes when it comes to the decisions that we make, they can be quite irrational, and thus if you try to understand someone, you'll have no clue as to why they did something. But that's why I introduce a lot of other variables such as emotional baggage, spiritual baggage, the way they felt in that moment, or any other sort of factor that may have some sort of effect to it. Because let's be honest, sometimes we make decisions that aren't fully rational and there's no reason for it, and thus you can't expect others to always make the best decisions and be the most rational person ever. And hey, I'm not telling you this to give them some sort of free pass to continue this toxic behavior. The actual reason that I'm telling you this is to educate you and make you understand that no one is perfect, and sometimes even though we want some individual to behave in a particular way, it's simply not gonna happen. And thus it's very important to understand that humans are always gonna be humans. As much as we like to be rational, try to think that we're special, try to think that we're extremely smart, at the end of the day, no one is gonna be 100% logical and rational, because no one is perfect, and that's fine. And that brings me to number three, accept the reality. The reality is that some individuals are always gonna be toxic relative to you. But at the same time, some individuals might also find you toxic relative to them. And that's just the nature of humans. Sometimes we're just not that compatible with other individuals, and that's fine. Does this mean that you need to completely get rid of that individual? Well, in some instances, it can be useful to do that. Say for example, if you're extremely hurt and every time you see that individual, obviously it's not a good idea to be surrounded by them, because every time you see them, you get reminded of the pain. So in that instance, I would recommend you to completely get rid of that person and perhaps try it again after 3 to 6 months when those emotions have toned down. But other than an extreme example like this, you don't always need to get rid of that toxic individual. Try to understand what you don't like about the individual. Try to understand what they're doing to manipulate you. Try to understand what that toxic behavior is, and this way you'll be able to analyze the stuff that they do, the tricks that they use to try to manipulate you. And once you understand this, it will be so much easier to deal with that particular individual, because you've seen through them and it simply doesn't faze you anymore. Because although you simply don't like their toxic behavior, you can now deal with it because you simply understand where it comes from, when they use it, and this way you can prepare yourself and prevent them from hurting you. And moving on to number four is to don't try to fix them, because the reality is most individuals that get stuck into a situation like this, they always try to fix the other individual, try to make them better, even if your moral compass is more intact. It doesn't matter because for them it isn't. And the thing about trying to fix other individuals is that you see it all of the times. Someone is trying to fix another individual, but they simply don't want to change. And in that instance, there's no point in trying to force them to change, trying to put so much effort and energy into them, because you could have used that energy for yourself to level yourself up, but instead you wanted to take them with you on the ride to help them level up too. Now you're stuck with an individual that you've put so much effort into, so much sweat and tears. You're so emotionally connected to that person, and thus it can feel so toxic and heartbreaking too. And when it comes to most individuals and changes, it usually happens when they've hit rock bottom. They realize that they're wasting their time. They realize that there's more to life and that they're holding themselves back. In those instances, that's when real change happens. So instead of trying to change someone that doesn't want to change, sometimes it's better to leave them to it. Sometimes pain is better for an individual like that, because after they feel the immense pain, they start to switch their life around. But I have to be honest and quite realistic when it comes to stuff like this, because the reality is that even if someone feels immense pain, unfortunately most individuals won't take the step to change themselves, because we as individuals love our comfort zone, and thus a lot of individuals will start to waste their life away by going to your lot of parties, taking drugs, alcohol, girls, or whatever it is, rather than actually trying to focus on themselves. I'm not saying that all of those things are bad. That's a topic for another day. But obviously most of the time those things don't help you in the long term. Yes, you need some sort of pleasure sometimes, and that's totally fine. I mean, everyone understands it. By the end of the day, if you're someone that wants to change, if you're someone that wants to grow, sometimes you need to go through pain to get actual growth. And thus, that's the thing when it comes to toxic people too. They always try to be the person to help them to change. Sometimes it's better to let them go through the pain, because at the end of the road, at the end of the day, for some individuals, they'll be able to grow beyond what is possible because they've suffered and have gone through the pain. And moving on to number 5 is to don't join in. So what do I mean by don't join in? Sometimes when some individuals have that annoying thing about them, are manipulating you or are playing with your brain, sometimes in those instances it's better to not join in at all, because when it comes to love toxic individuals, they love a reaction. Because every time if you give them some sort of reaction, whether that's a positive or negative reaction, they see that emotional spike and thus see that you're emotionally unstable, and that's their entertainment. And let's be honest, not every toxic person is always a bad person. Not every toxic person is always a stupid individual. It's someone that you don't want to hang around with, because sometimes you've got toxic individuals that are only toxic to you, while when they're talking with other individuals, they're perfectly normal. And in that instance, you want to change the relationship that you've got with that individual and you, rather than to be someone that completely gets rid of them, because you see the value between you two. And this might sound a little bit complicated and quite repulsive relative to the previous point, but the thing about this point is that you're not giving them any sort of attention. It's not like you're trying to change them. You're trying to change the relationship between the two of you by not feeding into their toxic behavior. Because if someone is constantly trying to be toxic and you completely ignore it, this toxic behavior doesn't work with this individual, or it doesn't give me the entertainment that I'm looking for. So instead of trying to be that toxic person with you, they'll be a little bit more normal, and voila, that's where you win. Because now they've stopped using the toxic behavior on you, and they can always find another individual when it comes to this toxic behavior. So please remember, not every toxic person is always a bad person. And at the same time, when it comes to toxic behavior, don't want to be someone that tries to fix the other individual, but rather try to fix the relationship between the two of you by avoiding to go into all of the toxic behavior. Try to ignore it. Don't give any sort of reaction when it comes to it, because otherwise they'll be their entertainment and they'll continue to use the toxic behavior. And this pretty much sums up the video. Now you understand how to deal with toxic people, and this way you can protect yourself when it comes to this. So hey, if you're someone that is new to this channel and would love to see more videos like this, please consider to hit the subscribe button and I'll help your brother out. Also, leave a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, because that truly helps this channel out. And today, while I'm recording this video, we've hit 15k subscribers, and thus, thank you so much for all of the support. I genuinely appreciate it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate your time, and I hope to see you on my next video. Bye bye.